Yo, yo, yo! Y'all ready to ask some questions? Today we are talking about the reading strategy of questioning. So get your notes out and let's get started. Alright, so questioning seems like a pretty easy concept, so let's just start with the basics. Why should you ask questions? Well, very similarly to the other reading strategies we've talked about, readers who ask questions during reading are actively engaged and focused. This is a theme. Hopefully you're picking up on that. Also, they tend to remember important details and information when they ask questions. And while you're asking questions, readers are monitoring their comprehension. So, in other words, as you're reading, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I just got to the bottom of a page. Before I flip to the next page, did I understand what I just read? If not, you know you need to go back and read. If you did understand it, then you can move forward. So, some secrets to successful questioning. When should you ask questions? This is another strategy that you should use before, during, and after reading because it can help you to make predictions, it can help you to summarize and make connections, it can help you to make inferences, it can help you to analyze and evaluate, and everything else. Readers must be able to generate their own questions instead of relying upon the teacher to do so. You may or may not have been trained in the past that the teacher will give you all the questions that you need to know the answer to, and then they might also give you the answer, and all you have to do is regurgitate the information. We are doing our best to train you to get away from that idea and to make you active readers who are in charge of your own learning. So, on that note, when you ask questions, realize that not all of them are going to be answered. Also, your teachers will not always know the answer to every question that you ask. A lot of times teachers are expected to know everything, but that's not possible. No one knows everything. It is your responsibility as a student to share in the process of obtaining knowledge. So if you ask a really good question and we don't know the answer, what would be really impressive is if you would go look it up and bring that information back to share with the class the next day. So that's what I mean by saying some questions may need to be researched to find an answer, and some questions you may research them and still not find an answer, and that's okay. So a few questions just to get you thinking about questioning. There are pondering questions. For example, I wonder if this is an important part of the passage. I wonder why the author keeps repeating this detail. There are predicting questions. Like, how do I think this story will end? You probably would ask that in the middle of a story. Or, what will this article be about? You might ask that before you start reading a nonfiction text. There are clarification questions, like, what does this word mean? What is the author trying to tell me in this section? So clarifying things that you don't understand. And then there are reflection questions, like, what did I learn? Do I need to read this again or watch this video again? And all of these strategies for questioning and types of questions can be applied not only to written text but also to digital text, any form of digital text, including videos and pictures and things that you see on television. So there are 4 types of questions that we are learning about for this class. Many, many, many types of questions exist, but we are focusing on 4 of them for our purposes. There are 4 to focus on when you are reading or encountering any type of text. I know that says 2, just ignore that. It's 4. So there are right there questions, there's discussion questions, there's thin questions, and there's thick questions. So those actually go together. You can kind of lump them into 2 groups, but they're a little bit different. So we're calling them 4 different things. So right there questions are asked when you skim the surface, and they can be answered by finding textual evidence that can be directly quoted from the text. So right there questions are very lower level thinking because you don't have to think too hard, you just have to reread to find the answer. These questions are good though, and they're necessary sometimes because they help you in comprehending the text and checking for understanding. So an example of a right there question might be, In the Scooby-Doo episode we watched during class, what was the name of the bandit? And you might remember that that was the handy highwayman, or the handy highway robber. What did Nemo's father tell him not to do in Finding Nemo? Obviously, anyone who's seen that movie would remember he was not supposed to touch the boat. He wasn't supposed to go out in the dangerous part of the ocean. He was supposed to stay by his dad on the reef. But Nemo, being independent, went out and he touched the butt. And then he got captured in the fisher net. So discussion questions then require some deeper thought. They cannot be found directly in the text, and they ask the reader to critically think about the themes or application of the text. These are the type of questions that people sometimes don't like because it forces you to think, and you can't just look back in the text and find a word-for-word answer. They help you to delve deeper into the text to make connections, and they aid you in determining the purpose or meaning behind what it is that you are reading. So these are the type of questions that when we ask them in class, we say this is a discussion. We want you guys to participate. And if it's a really good discussion question, then people will naturally want to raise their hand and say whatever it is that they're thinking. So an example discussion question. Do you agree or disagree with Brennan and Dale's way of life in the movie Step Brothers? Why do you feel this way? And if you've seen the movie Step Brothers, you know that it's about two 40-year-old males who act like they're still 15 years old and live with their parents. What do you feel is a lesson the viewer can take away from the movie Despicable Me? And if you've seen that movie, I'm sure that you can come up with a whole bunch of different ideas because, you know, the protagonist is not a typical protagonist. He's sort of a bad guy at first, and then he ends up being pretty okay. So everybody might be able to come up with something different for that. That's what makes it a discussion question. Okay, then you have thin questions. These are factual questions whose answers can be found in the text and that can be answered with a few words or a few short sentences. These are very similar to right there questions. So an example would be the question, which legs do frogs use to jump? Let's pretending that you're reading a science text. If this is a thin question, a right there question, then you as a reader would be able to look back in the text and find the answer. Well, of course, they use their rear legs. But then you have thick questions. These are similar to discussion questions, and they are the ones that readers have to think about more fully since the answers come from your head, not just from the text alone. And these questions have answers that are open to argument, so they're good for debating and discussing. And although there is not one right answer, the answers to thick questions should be backed up with textual evidence or support, as well as with the reader's own logical reasoning. So whenever we ask you for textual support for your answer, for example with an essay question, you know that we're asking you a thick question. And if we ask you to formulate a thick question, then we're looking for something that doesn't just have one right answer and that really requires the reader to think and to draw information from the text and put it together with what they already know. So an example thick question. Instead of asking, who is Captain Underpants, which is a thin question, you might ask, why is the principal, Captain Underpants, so funny? So the reason that this is a thick question is because it has different answers. For example, an answer might be that principals don't usually come to school in their underwear, or you could also say it is funny to see a character who is normally an authority figure become ridiculous. And that, in a nutshell, is questioning. So your phrase that pays for tomorrow is Starbucks coffee. Yum.